from Tracey from OnDeck.
How's everybody doing on this rainy morning? All right. So hey, y'all. I'm Tracey. Really excited to be here. I don't know how to use this thing. Okay, great. So I'm a digital product designer and a service designer. I'm trying to get this notes to work. Okay. And I help companies find the right solutions to build, and then I help them build those solutions. So I've worked for companies like OnDeck. Aha, thanks. So I've worked most recently for OnDeck, and OnDeck is a fintech that helps small businesses get funds for their business faster and easier than they were able to before. Before that, I was with the Adaptive Path group that was bought by Capital One, and I was with them as they stood up the service design practice at Capital One until they were fully assimilated. In the past, I've worked on innovation projects for USAA, for TIAA-CREF, and some other ones that I won't go into. So I've been in financial off and on for some time, and then kind of go back into healthcare and other different adjacent fields. So what are we even doing here? I ask myself this all the time. I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up thinking, oh man, I want to be a fintech designer. But you know, we're all here, and we sometimes ask ourselves why. So I was on a date the other night. We were talking about fintechs. I know that's really hot. So my date said a really smart thing, which it actually is kind of hot. And it made me acknowledge why I love working in fintechs. So I'm gonna share with you his brilliant comment. So he said, the sole purpose of a fintech is to reduce the frictional cost in various customer business transactions via improvements in UX, cost, time, and risk reduction. Now I'm sure everybody in the room might start to argue about, is that really true? Whatever. No, we're not going to get into that. But what it did was make me really acknowledge and think about why I really love to work for fintechs and why I love innovation in general. So we're here to root out these really complex frictions, and we're here to solve for those, and that's how we bring value. So I'm here today to say that friction for us is opportunity. And as product designers, and I'm going to say that's everyone in this room, not just if your title is design, but product managers, everyone involved, we have to be really good at this. We have to be really good at finding these frictions because they're really at the core to any opportunity or any value that we're going to bring. So to set expectations, I'm going to talk about some methods that I use a lot with my teams. And I'm going to talk also about multiple dimensions, which is science. And then we're going to talk about some feelings, and we're going to talk about, lastly, cats. No, I'm just kidding. But we are going to hit all these things, so stay with me. But first, do you guys know who these guys are? Anybody tell me? Yell it out. Yay, Guardians of the Galaxy. Okay, great. Before we get started, before I share my secrets with you today, I'm going to make you do a pinky swear oath. So I want you to turn to your neighbor, get out your pinky, and link pinkies with your neighbor. And this is very important. This is a very important oath. All right, everybody got their pinky swear partner. This is serious, you guys? Okay. All right, so I'm going to have you repeat after me. Ready? I solemnly swear that I will not attempt to do this alone, because no matter how badass I am, we're better together. How does that feel, you guys? This feels good. That feels good, doesn't it? All right. All right, if you don't remember anything else from what I say today, remember this, because this is core to what we're doing. It doesn't matter if you're a really smart person all by yourself, sitting in a room, doing these methods by yourself. If your whole team is not doing the method with you, if other people in your organization are not doing these methods with you, the team is not learning, the team is not finding the friction, and you're not gonna win the pot of gold. So Let's start with the first dimension. So the first dimension is really basic. It's length, really. So when we think about length, in the first dimension, I want you to understand the touch points and interdependencies of your service. So it's kind of basic, but really important. So I'm going to suggest using service blueprinting for this. Now, service blueprinting is it's a method that is very foundational to service design. You can use it to understand the current state of your service, or you can use it to understand a future state of your service and kind of map out the future of what you're building. This is a workshop that we did back in, I'd say 2017, I'm not sure. But the whole team got together with a bunch of cross-functional folks in our organization, and we mapped out our service. At the time, there was no documentation of how everything worked from start to finish. I find this to be true at almost every single organization that I go to. So I think that I think it's a good place to start, because even if you don't do a lot of research, at first you can still understand what your team knows already. Sorry guys, I'm having problems with this. So I think it's really important to get out what the team knows. There's a lot of built-in knowledge that the team has. There's a lot of, every single person in the group knows just a little bit. And what's true, I think, is that a lot of people don't really know the big picture. They know little bits of the picture. So even if you get your big group together, and even if you can do this in waves with different groups in your organization, you're gonna learn something. So buy pizza, host a workshop, get all your subject matter experts in the room, agree on who your user is, and that's really fun. And then take your best guess, but document it. And start to build this. And it's a living document. As you can see, our first was all built in sticky notes. It went all the way around a room. We took those boards in and out of a room because we didn't have a stable environment, but we got it done. So here's an example of what this turned out to be. So it ended up going into Excel. Now, I've worked at places that make these very beautiful, which I love to look at. But ultimately, you want them to be able to be maintained by whomever in the organization wants to and needs to maintain it. So we build ours in Excel. We do include, the colors that correspond with the sticky notes, because that's fun. So each and every one of these that I've ever built has been slightly different. But I want to call out a few things about them just so you have the basics. And then at the end of the talk, I'm going to show a screen with some resources in case you want to dig in and kind of do it yourself. So here in the middle, and it should be included in each service blueprint, you have a line of interaction, which is where the customer and the staff are interacting. So if it goes past the top into the middle, you know that there's an interaction happening between people. Also, there's a line of visibility, and what's happening there is anything below that line the customer doesn't see or know about, and probably really shouldn't. So across the top, and actually on each of these bands, they call these swim lanes. And so you have your customer actions, which are any action that the customer takes. Sometimes it's good to just start there and list out all the actions that the customer's taking. And then you have your customer touch points, so everything that they're interacting with. You have your front stage staff actions, so everything your front of the house staff is doing to interact with the customer. You've got your backstage staff actions, which are things that are going on behind the scenes, different, there might be information changing hands between multiple people. And then lastly, support processes, so technology, scripts, anything that's happening that needs to happen to run this particular part of the service should be listed there. And then I think this is actually a really good place to look for places to innovate, because sometimes it's an Excel spreadsheet. And you're like, we're seriously running that huge part of the business off of an Excel spreadsheet? Like, maybe that could be made more, a little bit better. I think we can find some time to fix that. So you might be thinking, okay, this seems really simple. You really just want me to map out what happens in the company. or in our service. And yeah, because the truth is that folks don't generally know how shit works. They just don't. You'd be surprised. Like I said, everywhere I go, I usually start here because I'm always really interested in understanding exactly how the process works, but usually it's just couched in various people, and you don't know, you don't have the full story. And if you don't have the full story, and if your team doesn't have the full story, then they're not finding the frictions, and they're not fixing them. So it's a good thing to do. So let's say that you have a process that's a really big pain in the butt for your customers, but then you can see that there's all these processes that are tied to it that are making it take longer than it should. It has to go offline, a lot of things need to happen. Those are the type of areas that we can look into and figure out how to redesign those and make them better for the customers because it saves them time in the long run. So those are just some ideas. So what does service blueprinting get you? You can document and align your team knowledge. That's a good start. You can start to understand and know your customer and your employee touch points. You can look at the connections between those processes and the interactions. And a pro tip is that when you get all these people in the room and you're doing this, go ahead and ask them what the known issues are, because they'll just pile them on you. You can also look at data at this point. Look at how your data is running. Look for those little problem areas. We'll talk a little bit more about data in a second. But go ahead and collect all the known frictions that you can find. And you could really stop here, and a lot of organizations do. So that's a way that you can approach this. But really, it's just the first dimension. So moving on to the second dimension. In the second dimension, we add width. So you have length and width. You kind of start to understand what kind of shape this thing is. So in the second dimension, I want you to expand your understanding of your customer experience. So take it past the point of just what's going on in your company and start to understand what's the customer's bigger picture, what's really going on with your users. So for that, I would recommend good old-fashioned user research. Now, I know you guys are starting to yawn right now, but that's okay. We're going to talk about this. So we want to try and find out, really, what happens to your customer before they come to you, what happens to your customer after they leave you, what are they trying to accomplish, what are their fears, what are their goals, who are they trying to become? And when you start to look at this, you start to understand the customer better, you start to understand your problem better, and you sometimes realize that the reason why people aren't signing up for your product has nothing to do with the form, but it has everything to do with their fear. So you have to understand what's going on with the customer to really start to tackle any kind of real friction that you have that's not related to, like, where's the button, or like, what's the field length or something like that. So I really highly recommend it. I know that a lot of people do it. I think a lot of people say they do it. So I'm just gonna make a nod on that. When you have done it, you can do things like actually build out real personas and not just archetypes, and you can start to understand what those pain points are and those challenges and add those to your list of known issues so you guys can start to brainstorm off of those and start to think about how do we solve for those. Now, again, I think people kind of scoff at this and they're like, Tracey, this is really basic stuff, like what are we doing here? But the truth is that feelings are hard, you guys. And your data does not care. Like, you can look at your data all day long and you can say, people are falling off at this point. And actually, this was an example that came up early in my career at OnDeck. People were saying, people are dropping off in the funnel. Like, they start our application and then they go away. Something's wrong with the form. Tell me what's wrong with the form. Well, there was nothing wrong with the form. Like, the form is fine. But what was happening is that there's a lot of fear and anxiety that it's wrapped up in, and especially in financial. Financial is rife with emotional friction. And you can't solve for that if you can't name it and you don't know what it is. It's going to be hard even if you know what it is. But to not know what it is and just to focus on your narrow customer journey will not help you get the adoption and the usage and the engagement that you want. So what's cool about user research? You can discover your desired outcomes and the challenges that they have. You can understand how customers actually use your product, which is cool. You can find those fears and emotional drivers. And you can also find unmet needs, so adjacent needs that have nothing to do with what your product is, which might be the key to your new product, by the way. So you can always be listening for those frictions. You might find, like Cabbage did recently, that there's another thing that needs to be served, like making sales easier for small businesses or something like that. So there's a lot of different reasons that you should be doing user research. And I know that you guys are all saying in your head, well, we did A/B testing last week. That's not user research. So I encourage you all to do your research. So let's move on to the third dimension. In the third dimension, you're adding height. So you can start to build a more nuanced point of view. This thing is starting to take shape. You can start to see some more detail about it. So in the third dimension, I want you to understand the highs and lows of your experience. I want you to understand where your biggest, most painful opportunities are. So before now, we've just kind of looked at everything as if it's all equal weight, as if it's all the same. Maybe you're a product manager, maybe you have a spreadsheet, and you're keeping a list of all those things. But when we start to think about it, some things actually bother customers more, some things way more. So we're going to think about the highs and lows of the experience. And to do that, I would encourage you to use experience mapping. So I don't know if you guys have tried this before, but it's a really fun experience. After you've done your research, get all the people in a room again, get the pizza, and start to create an experience map. So you can have everybody go through, and you're going to have them list out what they're doing, and they're thinking, and they're feeling across the entire journey. You're going to note down their touch points and their channels, and you can really start to understand what's going on, not just in your customer journey, but in the full experience of your customer. So you might end up with something that looks like this. This is an example I built with a team that was serving an auto insurance company. Really quickly off the bat, you can tell that this blue character over here is having a really bad day, right around here. The green character is having it's a little bit better, but also kind of bad. Then they're all joining together and having a really terrible time in certain parts of the experience. Everything's really shitting the bed here, about 3/4 of the way. There's some more issues here, and then at the end, the blue character, or the blue persona, is really having a bad time towards the end of their journey. So right off the bat, as a team, you can look at it and say, what do we want to fix first? Do we want to fix the blue guy's terrible day right at the beginning? Do we want to fix the stuff that's all rocky in the middle for everybody? Do we want to focus on this giant down point about 3/4 of the way? Those are conversations you can have, and that's where you start to create strategy, and that's where you start to prioritize, and you can actually make an impact to your customer's journey. You could even have a workshop. You could put that up, get everybody together. They can all add ideas on how to solve for that. But at the end, it's about prioritization. So your prioritization must include customer value also. If you're just using business value and effort, you could spend years doing that and look back 2, 3, 4 years later and realize you have not really changed your customer's experience at all. I'll give you an example. I used to work for a company called Quark, and I'm dating myself here, but we had a product called Quark Express. We, as designers at that company, tried really hard to get the product managers to care about the small issues that people using the software had every day. I'll give you an example. You couldn't even build bullets. Like, there was no automatic bulleting function in the software. So it was little things like that they had a million workarounds around, and it just drove people nuts. It drove us nuts as designers. But the product managers were really focused on these new, crazy, huge ideas for their customers who were not the users. And ultimately, InDesign came out. They had fixed those features. They gave it away for free for like a year and completely tanked Quark Express users. So if you're not paying attention to what your customers need, and if you're not prioritizing for that, someone else is going to come along and take it from you. So this helps you prioritize. This helps you think about what's the most important thing to the users, to the people who actually use our software. And so just let your prioritization also include customer value. I know we're not ever going to get away from like really needing to think about business value. But the customer is your business. So what's cool about experience mapping? Let's see. So you're going to create a deeper customer understanding, of course. You're going to find out what causes the most friction and also what causes the most joy to your customers. You might choose to take that joy moment and make it even bigger for people because they have a long memory of those things. You're going to create alignment with your team members, which again is one of the most important things about what we're doing as designers. And when I say designers, I mean all of us. And you can prioritize the opportunity areas that are going to get you the biggest bang for your buck. Okay, so when 3D is not enough, we have to have 4D, right? Let's go all the way to 4D. So oddly, I was researching the fourth dimension, and I don't know why, but cats kept coming up as I was researching the fourth dimension. Have you guys heard about the story about Newton's cats? Me either. So it's kind of complicated, but it has something to do with cats and four-dimensional space-time. So I started searching some more. And then there was a subreddit where people were feeling that cats are interdimensional, so maybe it's true, I'm not sure. And then one simple Google image search tells me that it's 100% true. But no, seriously, so the fourth dimension is time. So you take all those other dimensions and you add time. And I actually really love this futuristic drawing of Sony's 4D autofocus feature. Basically, you have the frames that are happening, and then the autofocus feature is supposed to predict what's going to happen in the future to help you focus better. This is a really good analogy for what we're trying to do. Your product's not static. Today it's here. Later it's going to be somewhere else. Your customers' needs are going to change a bit. The market's going to change a bit. Somebody's going to drop a new product into your ecosystem, and it's going to mess everything up. But what we can do is try to plan for what we're going to build. So I say that we should design the future that the customers want and need. I know everybody wants to talk about MVPs all day these days, but I can tell you that if you don't know what you're designing to, you're definitely not going to get there. So I would say go ahead, put a stake in the sand, and create an experience vision. So this is a really fun thing that we did a while back, where we were creating our experience vision for OnDeck, and we hosted another workshop, which were really fun, and we had people start to create storyboards and ideas based off of the ideas we had already generated together on the concepts that could be potential solutions for our customers. So we started building stories, and we started thinking about how this would fit together. So this is kind of like a vision board for your service. What do you want it to be in 3 to 5 years? How is it going to solve your customers' problems? What features would it have? What technical capabilities would be necessary to pull it off? And what channels should really be considered? These are some of the sketches that the team was making, and you can see with the orange sticky notes, they're actually starting to connect these stories together into a bigger story. So they're taking small storyboards, we're starting to connect them together. We continued to iterate on this until we made something that was a broader vision for our product. So you can do this in a lot of different ways. You don't have to have a huge budget. You can find the person and your team. I think The person on my team is here somewhere that's really good at illustrations, and you can have someone illustrate the panels for you. You could make a video if you have a ton of money. We don't, but Samsung does. So you could take stock photos and kind of manipulate them into, dropping in your own images and making it more realistic for your product. Or you can create sketches. And honestly, we've done this with stickman figures in the past, and it's fine. It gets the point across. Now you can get fancy and stage a photo and then make a sketch over that, and that's another way to make it look a little bit more styled. But it doesn't really matter as long as you're getting the story out there and you're creating a story, because stories are something that our brains hold on to. It's actually kind of innate to us. If you hear a story, you remember it better, you can focus on it better, you have empathy. Here's an example from the vision that we made. This is one of 13 key moments that we had created. So in this key moment, the person is receiving funds. And I have blacked out a little bit of it, but we wanted to talk about how the person would be receiving money in the future, and the way they were receiving money in the future is instantly. We actually launched this feature last year, so I can say that. But the point is that the things that I marked out are not quite finished yet, and that's okay, because at least they're being worked on. At least a vision existed, and you could see how, at least you can see how all these things come together, and what we ultimately want to build, you can put those on the roadmap, and you can think about how to get there. So why is this important? I can tell you right now that your PowerPoint bullets will not create a shared or sustainable or aspirational vision that you need for transformation. It probably won't even be any of those things for one phase, much less for multiple phases, which is what you're gonna need if you're doing really big change and if you're building really, really large-scale changes for your customer. So what's it's gonna get you? I think it's gonna get you a loose description of what we wanna build and what it solves. It's going to get you an overview of the necessary features and capabilities that would need to be there. It's going to create alignment and inspiration for your teams. And the best part to me is that it starts to become a strategic driver that lets you backcast and plan. So you can take this vision apart and say, okay, let's build another service blueprint. Let's build a service blueprint of the future. What's going to have to be true to make this entire story true? And you can start to plan for that. And lastly, it's a benchmark. So every time you start to do strategic planning, you can look back at your vision and say, do we need to change this? Do we know something new? Do we need to change the vision? And you know what? It's okay to change the vision. It's good to change the vision. As you learn more things, as the company grows, as you know more about the customer needs, change the vision. Go back on your roadshow, talk about the new vision. Because the truth is that half the people that were employed there the first time you did the vision are not still there now anyway. So you might as well just, start over. I mean, these visions need to be tangible, they need to be stories, and they also need to survive attrition. So make it something that's memorable, make it something that can be put up on the walls, make it something that anyone in your company could explain. So this is a list of resources that I threw together as I was thinking about this presentation. There are 2 guides from Adaptive Path that are free. They're still out there on Medium, which is nice. There's a guide to service blueprinting and a guide to experience mapping. This is Service Design Doing. It's a great resource. The user's always right. It's a good classic. Observing the user experience, also a good classic. Mapping experiences is a good one. And orchestrating experiences, also very helpful for large-scale design. Cooper has great training. Nielsen Norman has great training. General Assembly has great training. And Jared Spool has some good training as well. So all the things that I mentioned today, you can learn more about, and you can start to try with your teams if you're not already doing it. So I do want to give a shout out to my team at OnDeck. Hi, guys. I want to thank them for being out here today and for supporting me. And I also want to let you know that we're hiring design leaders. And if you want to come work at a place that will allow you to do this kind of work, OnDeck is a great place to do it. And I also want to thank OnDeck for supporting me in my next adventure, which is to start my own consultancy. So I'll be working under Multiplier. So if you want to work together and you want to get your teams going faster in the right direction, please get in touch. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Wow, that's loud.